So Mom can't look at this later, huh?
She can.
But
Look
it's
at her right now if she wants. She was sitting next to you the whole time.
Hello, everybody. This is a new entry. We're going to be doing the Patriot Files. This is where I'm going to sit down and have some conversations with some people that I find interesting and that I hope you will find interesting as well. Today, for episode 1, I'm going to bring somebody that I look up to a great deal. Might have helped raise me, but I think some of his story will be very interesting to everybody. Has a history from being in Vietnam and some military background, some private business, entrepreneurship, as well as working as a police officer for, I believe, 25 years. I'll let him tell that story. And is now retired and helps out with the family. So I just want to introduce everybody to my father. So
You used to look up to me before I got old. The older I get, the shorter I get.
that does sound about right. But so who are you? What'd you do? Give us a little bit of your background.
Okay, well.
When I get a little bit closer there to the microphone, it's going to clip a little bit. If you got to move it closer, we can adjust it. That's good. Yep, just kind of loosen the knobs there and get it closer too if you want.
Doesn't come with instructions, huh?
It does not.
Well, you probably recognize me because I'm your father.
That's true. I do.
And born and raised in California. And only left California because you won't come back to California.
Can't really blame me though, can you?
Yeah, I got tired of the sunshine, so I flew out here to see you in West Virginia in the rain and snow.
Okay. It's not my fault. It is snowing. It's a little cold. Okay. But it's the winter somewhere other than Southern California.
It's very cold. But I don't know.
So where do we start? Just start wherever you want. Pick it up early on, as early as you want. Like I said, you can go as far back as when you were looking to join the military. You can start wherever you want.
Wherever I want. What changed my life? Why I am what I am today. Well, God, I don't know. When we were talking upstairs earlier in the kitchen with Mom, just reliving some of the things, and she's reminding me some things. It's amazing how much I've forgotten until you forced me to start thinking.
I could see that.
But I think I became the way I was because of my father a lot. He was a hard worker. Built, when I was born in 1946, he and his brother built the first house that we lived in La Crescenta, California. So they built it by hand from start to finish, all the carpentry, plumbing, electrical, everything. He did that when he was home from work. So it was weekends and night shift building this house. But so I learned a lot growing up. He could always fix anything around the house, and I just wanted to be like him. Well, then his job moved from La Crescenta, Anaheim, to Anaheim, and we ended up buying a new house in Garden Grove way back in 1957, 56, 57. And I remember growing up there more because I was older then, 11 going on 12, but I don't know, starting to remember more. He was spending more time with us. And again, the house we bought in Garden Grove at the time, they could barely afford it at the time. $24,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Garden Grove. And
Wait, hang on. You said $24,000.
yeah,
Not 240,000.
not even 124.
Not 2.4 million.
No, nothing like
$24,000. Okay,
$24,000.
that's a little different than things are now.
A lot. And you actually got some property with the house.
Oh yeah, no. Nowadays you're sharing what 5 fences with your neighbors.
At least. Where we live now, we have what we call zero property line. You see, you share that property line with your neighbor. He has the right to come 4 feet on your property, what you think is your property, to do any repairs to his house, and you can't say no. Anyway, back to Garden Grove.
Okay, so $24,000 land, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house.
2-car garage.
Okay, so the American dream. Did it have a
American
white picket
dream.
fence by any chance?
But he had talked my mom into buying mortgage insurance for the house at the time they bought it. And my mom told him they couldn't afford it. He ended up talking her into it because he said, no one knows what the future holds. So
It's true. None of us do.
later on in the story, you'll see why I thought that was a good, wise investment. But growing up then is when Disneyland was starting to be built. And our house in Garden Grove was just a short bicycle ride away from Anaheim, where Disneyland was being built. And so my bicycle at 11, 12 years old, I would ride from Garden Grove to Anaheim to watch the construction of Disneyland. The earth movers, all that stuff. So did a lot of bicycle riding. That was the start of my bicycle riding career, you might say.
So you also didn't probably worry too much about being kidnapped,
No,
being assaulted.
no.
You could go out, ride your bike. Was it true that back then you could leave, be out all day on your bicycle and come back when the sun went down and that was acceptable?
Yeah, no problem.
Because it feels like that's some urban legend that people tell us.
And we didn't have a cell phone either.
You had a kitchen phone that had about a 40-foot cord on it. And that's about it.
Seems like it.
Okay,
But
so you were riding around going to
You'd leave
visit.
the house and mom would say, be back before dark. So you got back before dark.
Or else.
You didn't want to know or else.
Okay, so
My dad was a strict disciplinarian.
so strict punishment if you ignored that. So that makes sense.
Yeah, you didn't ignore the belt too often. So back then, it wasn't child abuse.
One might argue it still isn't, but a lot of people would disagree.
Yeah. So, long story short, that first summer there, we went to Michigan, where he was from, to see his brother and his mom and dad's side of the family. And they had just purchased a new 1957 Chevrolet 4-door. Oh, great car. Drove that across the country from Garden Grove to Michigan. And while we were in Michigan, it was his brother was a good freshwater fisherman. We went on a fishing trip on Lake Michigan. I think like second or third day there. We go out in the boat, which has an outboard motor, the 3 of us, my uncle, my dad, myself. And during that fishing expedition, we were in a cove where the outboard motor got tangled up in some kelp seaweed to the point where it wouldn't run. So my uncle stood up in the boat to pull the outboard motor up, which in turn caused the boat to capsize, which is when I immediately found out that neither my uncle or my dad knew how to swim. But I did. I was a good swimmer, learned how to swim back in La Crescenta, Pasadena area, and at the public pools. Anyway, I was able to get my uncle safely to the boat, which he was close to. He grabbed onto the overturned hull, went to try and get my dad, and it was just too much weight, too much fighting me. He ended up drowning that day. So at 12 years old, I witnessed my father drowning, which
Probably changed the trajectory of your life completely.
yeah, my sister at the time was living with us. I was 12, she was 16. She was 4 years older than me. So my mom, my sister, and I were in Michigan, ended up flying home. My uncle, my father's brother, was a long-distance truck driver for a car manufacturer. He would drive cars on his truck and car hauler East Coast to West Coast. So he ended up bringing our new 57 Chevy back to the West Coast for us, which is the car that my mom had. And it turns out the mortgage insurance he purchased ended up paying the house off, the $24,000 home. So my mom didn't have to worry about mortgage payments, but she still had to work her full-time job and sometimes a weekend job to keep food on the table and clothes on our backs type thing.
Utility bills, incidentals, like any other expenses that she needed to cover, she still had to work.
Right. She still had to work full-time.
So do you think she would have been able to pay the mortgage as well, or do you think
No,
that would have not
no.
been an option?
No, we'd have lost the house for sure.
So
sure.
in general, like when we look at property, mortgage insurance nowadays, a lot of times people skip it. A lot of times people think it's not necessarily required. They don't always carry life insurance. Like there's so many things that kind of like the adulting stuff that a lot of people nowadays, especially people my age and younger, we look at that stuff as, oh, it's not a big deal. We're invincible, right?
Unnecessary expense.
Yeah. So it sounds like if that, I may not even exist if that hadn't happened, right? Because there's a lot of things that happened after that you probably wouldn't have been even in those situations. You might have ended up back in Michigan. You could have ended up in a couple of places, but
only God knows our future.
that is true. That's true. That's something that, like, no matter what you do and how much you plan and think, like, you never know what the plan actually is going to be. So after that, he had passed. You and Grandma were still living in Garden Grove.
Right.
So
just before we went on that trip, I forgot this one part of the story. I was going to grade school in Garden Grove when I was, I'm trying to think, between 5th and 6th grade. And then when I was in the 6th grade there, the schools there weren't really a challenge to me. I had a pretty good memory way back then. Not so much now.
Pre-COVID.
Not so much now, yeah. And just passed all the classes, no problem. And anyway, the school district notified my parents that they recommended that I skip a grade. And at that time, it would have caused me going from the second half of 6th grade to the second half of 7th grade. I wouldn't even have finished the elementary school. And my parents weren't sure what they wanted to do, so they left it up to me. Well, at the time, I was still larger than the average 12-year-old at the school I was going to. And I'd always, the year before, looked up to the kids that were older than me, were better athletes, and I always did athletic stuff with them. So I wanted to skip the grade and get up with the older kids.
Makes sense.
Except I went from being the best kid in class to being just the average, so to speak, kid in class.
I mean, helps you grow though, right? Like if you're always the smartest, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room. So,
and I went from being a good athlete the year before to being just the average athlete the next year. Didn't have the experience that an extra year of sports would have given me.
sure.
So later on in high school, college, junior college, playing sports, it just seemed like if I'd have stayed where I was and been a little more, active in athletics instead of being second string, I'd have been first string and yada, yada, yada. So
Do you think the extra time developing might have helped? Instead of skipping, you would have had that time to put into athletics maybe instead of slacking in school?
looking back on it, I wish I hadn't skipped that grade. I wish I'd have stayed where I was and see what the future held. But, it is what it is, was what it was.
Yeah. Sometimes we try to do things on our own timetable.
Yep. Anyway, get out of, where was I on this conversation?
So we were just getting past the trip to Michigan. The car had made it back to
Yeah.
California. Mortgage was paid off. Grandma was working just to pay
She was
the
working,
bills.
I was working. I had a paper route from the time we got back from Michigan, and it wasn't the paper house like they are when you were doing papers.
Oh yeah, that's right. I took over. I helped take over my brother's paper route, if I remember right.
Right.
My memory's a little foggy there, but yeah.
But back when I was doing it, I had to do the paper route on my own on my bicycle with the paper route bags on the handlebars. And we had to go out and get new subscriptions. We had to deliver the papers before dark on the bicycle. And at the end of the month, had to do the collections for the paper from the people.
So you were in sales, you were in delivery, and you had to do the collections for the
Right.
fees and then
Right.
turn those in.
Right.
So if you signed people up and delivered papers, but you failed on the collection side, did you have to pay out of pocket for that, or was
I
that?
don't know. I didn't have that problem.
Oh, good.
Everybody felt sorry for me.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that, or maybe you broke some kneecaps. I don't know.
No. Not at that time.
Okay, so a legit paper route, not like when we were doing it where the company took care of the subscriptions and collections and they gave you a pallet of papers and, you know, I had you drive me around in the van
Mm-hmm.
and we'd throw them out the window. So it was a little different.
Out the window where we left the side door of the Astro van open.
That's right, the slider door.
And
Yeah.
You just sat on the floor and threw them out the side door. But like you said, you took that job over from your brother.
Yeah.
And then you did it for a while.
I mean, I think it was good though. It gets you that work experience early in life. Like I think that's something that like my generation and younger, I think we're seeing more and more is people get into their 20s even now. They're getting out of college and they've never had a job. Like they don't know the basics, whether it's showing up on time, waking up to an alarm clock. They don't know what it's like to be accountable to a boss or a company. Like they've never had those
But
issues.
Even though you didn't have to collect money from the people, just the stack of papers would be there when you came home from school. But it gave us time together because I would remember sitting there folding papers with you,
Oh yeah.
driving you around while you threw them, so you didn't have to carry them on your bicycle. But back then, when you were delivering papers, you had so many of the area you were responsible for that it would have taken a couple trips at least on a bicycle.
Oh yeah, to do that on a bicycle would have just been completely impractical. Like, and you would see other people like doing their routes, and they'd be driving around. Maybe it was an older guy, but you know they'd have a regular passenger car with the side window down, and they'd have the stack of papers in the back seat and in the front. They would be throwing them also, like trying to do that. The only thing that was annoying, I remember now, is the apartment buildings because you couldn't throw them from the car. You had to get out. So we just get out the side door on the van. You would slow down, stop, get out, take the 4 or whatever you would need for that little set of apartments. You'd put them on the doorsteps and then come back, same thing, drive to the next little set of apartments.
And the way things have progressed nowadays, we're living in the same house.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But there are no more kids delivering papers. You see the older people coming around in car, and it's always 2, but it seems like the less fortunate people have to do those kind of jobs to make money. And
so it's shifted. I mean, you see that on a lot of jobs though, right? Like fast food, the newspapers, like a lot of those demographics where it used to be younger kids or teenagers that were trying to learn basic job skills and get kind of into the job force in general. A lot of those jobs have kind of been taken over by older people, and then they keep pushing minimum wage to be higher and higher so that those people can make a living doing the jobs that used to be the entry level jobs, just teaching you basic job skills. And then you move on, you be a manager, you go work somewhere else. I wouldn't want to have a paper route for my whole life. I don't think that's what you should be trying to support a family of 4.
No.
So yeah, that's interesting though, that you say now you pretty much only see people probably in their 50s, 40s, 50s or
40s,
higher.
50s, driving around 2 to a car, 1 driver, 1 thrower. And they're not even, I remember back in the day, I don't know if I made you or it was just you and your brother took it upon yourselves, but you didn't just throw a paper on the driveway. I mean, if you threw the paper and didn't get up by the garage door or up by the front step, you'd jump out and go put it up there.
Yeah.
Nowadays, where we live, when we were taking the register paper, they'd throw the paper. Sometimes it'd land on the sidewalk. sometimes in the street even.
I was gonna say the gutter was
The
my
gutter.
favorite.
Yeah, the gutter. And
Thankfully, it
they
doesn't
don't-
rain a lot. And
They don't care. Just say throw a paper. They don't care where it lands. It could be in the bushes or what. Anyway, back from that.
so you were doing papers to help grandma pay bills.
Yeah.
So then after the papers, you were getting further in school, probably getting close to the end of high school at that point, or
Yeah. But I skipped the grade, went into junior high, went into high school, started playing football as a freshman in high school.
okay.
Was on junior varsity as a freshman, varsity as a sophomore through senior year. And was always, I felt good in football, but never, a lot of times not until my last year, good enough to play first string. So a lot of times I didn't get into games until, towards the end of the game, kind of like it is now for kids. But I love the camaraderie of being on a football team, even though you weren't in the game all the time. You help the team by helping the first string guys have someone to play against during the week when you were getting ready for the next game.
Sure.
So you do your best trying to outdo them, and you'd always have your one-on-one drills trying to show that you were better than them. But
Well, I mean, even so, team sports are like that, right? But even solitary sports, like fighting or some of the other more solitary sports, they still have that kind of team element, right? Like they still have people they train with.
yeah,
They still have their support staff. They still have the people they practice with. Like those people are just as involved as getting those people to the end. And just because you're sitting on the bench and you're helping in practice, you still get a ring if you get somewhere in some of those sports. So,
but my sophomore year, I think it was sophomore, I went out for swimming also. One of the things I asked my football coach was, what off-season sport could I do to help me in football? He suggested for endurance running, stuff like that, to go into swimming.
okay.
He felt that doing swimming, even though I wasn't physically have the body as a swimmer, because I was bigger.
I would assume as a football player, you probably don't have a swimmer body.
The swim coach immediately put me in the 400-meter freestyle.
That is not a short race.
No, and it's a lot of work
Yeah.
during the week. You go to school in the morning, swim for an hour, hour and a half, go to class. After school, you're out there swimming again for an hour, hour and a half.
Oh yeah.
And then you go to the race, and it's a long race. So did that on the swim team, but after my first year of swimming, did better in football the next season. But after that season, the swim coach was on me I haven't seen you sign up yet. What's going on? I go, I'm not coming out for swimming this year. It's too hard.
Compared to football.
Compared to football.
Oh, don't let the football people hear that.
Well, during football, you go, can I say balls out?
Sure.
As a football player, for the play you're involved in, if you're in the game, but after that play, you're back in the huddle, catching your breath, resting, relaxing a little bit, going on to the next play. Then you're back in the huddle after that play, resting a little bit.
So it's more like short sprints.
Right.
You're not really constant. Like that's something they say a lot about soccer, right? Is that soccer players, you're running the whole time.
It's
Whereas,
like swimming, I was swimming a lot.
well, 400 meter free is a lot of swimming.
I did that and the 100-meter backstroke. Those two were my events, but I'll tell you, it was a lot of work. And I just look back on it now and feel like maybe I should have stuck with it for at least another year to see how much more I could improve in football. Who knows?
Yeah. Makes sense.
So in my senior year of high school, I was looking forward to going to junior college because I didn't think that I wanted to go away from home for college, 4-year college. So I was watching Santa Ana Junior College, Orange Coast Junior College were the two that I was looking at. Well, that year, my senior year of high school, Santa Ana Junior College was one of the teams involved in, at that time, they called it the Junior Rose Bowl, which they played the week before the actual Rose Bowl that happens now.
Okay.
And Santa Ana Junior College won the Junior Rose Bowl that year that I was a senior in high school. So I thought, I want to go there.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you see the one that does really well, you say, I want to be part of something like that, right? Like team sports are that way. You want to be part of something bigger.
But I had nobody to direct me and talk me into my thinking, talk me into my way of thinking. Why was I wanting to go there? But anyway, I signed up at San Antonio JC, go out for football, make the team. And we ended up, I think, winning 2 games that year.
Oh.
Because
So not the glory that you were.
I was looking for. And Orange Coast College went to the Junior Rose Bowl and won it that year.
Oh, so the other school that you were considering going to, but you didn't because they didn't make it that year.
Right.
You went to the one that made it, but then they just flipped places the next year.
Exactly.
Okay. That's unfortunate.
Life. That's life.
That is life. Yep.
So after football season, my class schedule, I wasn't making very good grades in classes.
You were focusing on sports?
Exactly.
Okay.
Football.
But not girls.
No, not girls.
Just sports.
Just sports.
Okay.
So because of my bad grades, my failing grades, found out I was ineligible to go out for football the next season unless my grades picked up drastically.
Sure.
So I looked at my options. At that time, I'm 17, getting ready to go on 18. And that was the other reason looking back at high school, I didn't enjoy the decision I made to skip a grade because now I graduated June of, I'm trying to think, 50, what did I say, 56?
So you were 17 when you graduated.
I was 17 when I graduated in 63, 1963.
So you had just turned 17 then. Because your birthday is in May. So you would have just turned 17 when you graduated.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. Just turned 16 when I graduated.
Oh, okay. So you graduated. Okay. So you graduated extra early.
I graduated early, so I couldn't drive while I was in high school.
That's unfortunate for a high school senior.
Yeah, especially the car I had. Can I go back step a little bit?
Sure.
Talking about my first car. 12 years old. My father just passed away.
Yeah.
Come back to Garden Grove. And in my mom's wisdom, she knew that I liked cars and liked talking about cars a lot. So she said, if we could get you a car right now that you couldn't drive, but you could work on here at home, what would you want to get? A 40 Ford Coupe.
That's a good choice.
I liked it.
That is a...
Back in 1957, that was, 17 years old.
Which is interesting because also now you look back and like a 57 Chevy compared to a 40 Ford, like those are the two that everybody knows. You have a 1944 Coupe and a 57 Chevy, typically what, Bel Air, 2-door.
It was a Bel Air 4-door.
She had a 4-door. Yeah. You say unfortunately, but nowadays people would look at a 57 Chevy and a 1940 Ford Coupe. Those are like the two iconic classic cars everybody would love to have.
So we found a 40 Ford Coupe for sale, went and looked at it, $150. And back then, my mom couldn't afford it, but she did it.
Yeah. It's part of one of the working a full-time, sometimes a second job.
Yeah.
She made it work.
She made it work. Bring the car home, parked her car outside the garage so I could put the 40 Ford Coupe in the garage, jacked it up to make sure I didn't try and drive it.
It's probably a good idea.
Took a couple of the wheels off. Anyway, from the time I was 12 until I got my license at 16, which was just before graduation, I worked on that 40 Ford Coupe all the time. So it was her way of making sure I stayed at home. I wasn't out on the streets. And,
so it gave you something to do.
Yeah.
Kept your hands busy.
So.
Because idle hands in high school, I'm sure you know, dangerous.
So I ended up almost rebuilding that thing from top to bottom just because I had nothing else to do.
Sure.
Took the flathead V8 out and put a small block Chevy in it and B&M hydro transmission.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say you took a Chevy engine and put it in a 40 Ford Coupe?
Yeah. Well,
like any good racer does.
Exactly.
Keep a 9-inch rear end in the back, Ford rear end, Chevy motor.
I did all that back in the 1950s.
Sure.
So that was my first car.
First car, 1940 Ford Coupe. Now I can see why you say there's so many similarities in our upbringing. Because you didn't, I didn't know about the, like when you were going over your sports, not doing well in school, you go to college, don't do well enough there where you can't really stay. Then you get out. You had a classic car as your first car. Then you get out of college and you're like, well, if I can't do college, I got to do something.
Well, before I went to college, even once I started driving that 40 Ford Coupe, it turned out to be the second fastest car in the school.
Wait, who had the fastest?
The kid that had a 1964 Plymouth Fury 426 Hemi.
Okay, 426 Hemi Fury. That makes sense. Okay. So he was a little faster than you or a lot faster?
And the street we lived on was two
Straight.
houses away from a drag strip street. It was a 4-lane street outside where we lived that had block walls on both sides of the street, no sidewalk, so you didn't have to worry about pedestrians. But it was what we called our drag strip.
So was this like a sanctioned official drag strip, or was this
No.
the street that just happened to have no sidewalks?
It was our unofficial drag strip.
Okay. So
That's
we
where
were
all the
street
kids-
racing.
That's where all the kids raced.
Did the police know about that?
Oh, yeah.
But they left you alone.
Well, if we got outside of that area, back then the police were our friends.
Okay.
So
As long as you kept it off of the regular public roads and you stayed on that one that had nice blocks on both sides, no pedestrians, and you weren't crazy about it, they left you alone.
But we weren't smart enough to know that at the time. So we get crazy.
Kids never are.
We get crazy at other places. So the police would get a description of the car.
And they know who it is.
It was a gunmetal gray 40 Ford Coupe.
They go, oh, there's Dale again.
I'd come home sometimes and the police car would be parked in front of the house.
Oh, okay.
So after a couple of visits from the police department and after about 6 tickets from other agencies,
Okay.
my mom forcibly sold that 40 Ford Coupe out from under me.
Oh, because it was hers on paper.
On paper, yeah.
With all of the work you had done to it, everything.
It was just labor. The money part was her.
Okay.
She paid for
The
anything,
parts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Parts. So when she did that, I was totally irate and pissed. So that's what caused me in the long run to, at the time, couldn't play football because of grades.
Yep.
Didn't want to go back to junior college. And I was getting ready to turn 18. And I wanted to join the service.
Okay.
So my cousin was getting ready to join the service, and he was going to join the Navy submarine service. And at that time, if you joined the Navy before you were 18, you only had to commit to 3 years.
Instead of the normal 4-year
Instead
contract.
of the normal 4-year contract.
Okay.
So that's what I wanted to do. Talked to my mom, she wouldn't sign for me.
Because at the time, and I think still, if you want to join before you're 18, is you have to have a parent
Right,
co-sign.
right.
Okay. Makes sense.
And she wouldn't sign so I could join the Navy with my cousin. So her selling my car and not signing for me really ticked me off. So I thought, well, I'll get even with you.
Perfect. So you're upset with her for doing what she probably should have done.
As a good parent.
Looking
yes,
back.
Yeah. I would do the same thing.
But the way to if I had done the same thing, yeah. And so to get back at her, because you didn't have opportunities in school anymore, you didn't have any opportunities, your car's gone. So to get back at her for selling it, you said, I'm going to show you.
And I thought I'd make a decision on my own without talking to her about it. And I joined the Army.
So, okay. So what was the reason, what was the motivation that she wouldn't sign for you to join the Navy? Because in my head, I'm looking at having been in the Navy. I'm like, the Navy is a better, safer choice than the Army.
Well, going back to junior college is an even safer choice. But
That is also true. But just like you, when I was in college before I went into the service, is I did not academically do well enough to stay there.
yeah,
I wasn't focused enough. I wasn't disciplined enough. I wasn't mature enough to realize that that would have been the right answer.
but see, you had a wise father when you were growing up.
Yeah, but
took
we all
time
know
to-
you don't listen to your wise parents.
But at least you had one that talked to you and advised you and
That's true.
gave you a couple of different choices, and that was pretty much it. Or you'd have been out of the house on your own.
That is true. So that was my choice. It was the military. Either way, I was leaving the house
Right.
because I was not in school anymore. And when I came home from college, I didn't want to go to community college. I think I actually did briefly. Or was that after?
No, that was after San Diego State.
That's right. Okay. So when I came back from college, I tried and I was like, this ain't for me. And I also wanted to go into the submarine service.
Yeah.
That was my original intent when I went in.
I remember that.
Yeah. I was going to be a sonar tech because I figured if I wanted to be on a submarine and you want to be in the Navy, best way to do that, sonar. Because there are some surface ships with sonar, but like the likelihood is that's a submarine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So you wanted to be in the submarines. You wanted to join the Navy, but grandma wouldn't sign for it.
So I ended up, my logic was the Army was only a 3-year commitment. So I didn't want to, at the time, make a 4-year commitment in the Navy, Air Force, or Marines.
And you didn't have the Space Force option yet. So.
And I didn't look into any of them at all as far as
MOS's, jobs.
anything, nothing.
So you went in completely blind.
Completely blind.
So you went into the recruiter and said, I want to be in the Army.
A friend of mine took me to the recruiter in Santa Ana. That day, on my 18th birthday, May 28th, I signed the papers.
So you didn't even, you were undesignated then. You went in just as an undesignated infantryman.
Correct. At the time. So
Okay.
I remember after signing the papers, I called my mom at home to let her know that I wouldn't be home that night.
Like, wait, so on your birthday, you sign the papers with the recruiter.
Yeah.
You call grandma and say, I'm not coming home.
And her answer was, why? I just joined the Army. and
So
about
she knew you were interested in the military because you had asked her about the Navy, but she told you no. So she was thinking that's over and done with.
yeah.
So because you're upset at her, you sign up, you say, I'm not coming home because I'm now in the military.
And I getting ready to get on a bus to go to Fort Ord, California.
Oh, so you weren't delayed entry at all.
Oh, no.
You signed the paper and you were on the bus.
I was on the bus.
Okay, because I was DEP, right? Like, so delayed entry program, I didn't immediately go. There was a brief period. So you sign the papers, call grandma, say, I'm not coming home, and you're on a bus.
Right.
I'm sure she was thrilled.
Not really.
Did you get your revenge?
No, I think she got hers.
Okay. Okay, so you're on a bus to boot camp now,
Boot camp at Fort Ord,
which is where?
Central California.
Okay.
So that wasn't bad.
It could have been worse. My boot camp was in the Great Lakes area, so that was cold in the winter.
Very. So after basic, go home for like a 1 week leave, got assigned to Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Okay, so you grew up in California, now you're assigned to Oklahoma.
And the MOS I had at the time was an artillery surveyor. So that's what I was trained as in the Army, as an artillery surveyor. And
So real quick, what does that job entail?
pretty much entails before the guns, the 105s, the 155s are brought in, you have to survey their, what do you call it now? The azimuth for the different directions of fire.
Okay.
So they know where to set up the guns when they first get there, and then make sure that they're accurate. So the forward observer, when he calls in a certain azimuth degree, they know that they're not going to hit friendly.
So how
Forces.
close are you? Like if you're in that kind of job and you're looking to shoot artillery down range, are you like halfway there? Are you like way up front? Like how, like are you sitting way in the back?
Way in the back with the guns.
Okay.
Our job is pretty much over by the time the guns get there.
So you're just helping the initial setup
Right.
and initial directional, but then the forward observer, they're taking care of targeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense.
So during it being at Fort Sill, wasn't exactly the coolest place on earth. It was hot, being out in the field was dirty, dusty.
Yeah.
But back at the barracks one day, I saw a flyer that had been posted on one of the bulletin boards. They were looking for experienced swimmers to apply to be lifeguards
Okay.
at the post at Fort Sill.
Okay.
I thought, I can do that. I was on the swim team in high school and knew how to swim. And so I went down and took the test. No problem. I got that position.
So like a swim test or like a academic test?
Swim test.
Okay, swim test.
There was no life saving involved. It was just,
No CPR, no first aid, no just.
no, they're going to teach you that.
Okay.
Can you swim and not drown? You know,
So not
After-
a lot of candidates,
after
or
doing a 400 meter, I figured I could swim the length of the pool easy. I swim several legs. I got the job. Ended up putting me at the post NCO Dependa pool, which means you're not at a pool that's just going to be service guys. You're at the Dependa pool where all the wives and kids go to swim,
okay.
which was a great location.
I- So you had all the so this is NCOs. So this is the non-commissioned officer
right,
side.
right,
Anyone from E1 up to E9, their dependents would go to this pool.
right.
So not just young, you had like teenagers, because there's E8s, E9s,
Yeah.
people that were higher up. So they had families. So you had any attractive girls that would be at this pool, I'm
Yeah,
assuming?
once
Because like
in a
when I
while.
was lifeguarding, again, another similarity. When I was lifeguarding, that was the big perk. Because
Yeah.
we were lifeguarding at the pools by the high school for us, and I was in high school at the time. So I got to see all the girls that would come sunbathe that were in my school. They would be at the pool. So okay, so you're now at the NCO dependent pool lifeguarding. That's your job
That's
now.
tough job. Yeah.
So your job in the military is now.
No more surveying out in the field and no more camping out in the dirt.
Was this like a TAD position for a short thing, or this was like now your
This-
job?
Well, the post pool, NCO Dependa pool, being in Oklahoma, it's a year-round pool. So
Okay.
that's your job.
So you went from training artillery in the field to lifeguarding at a pool for your permanent military job.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds like a pretty good perk.
Well, it was until I made a wrong decision.
Oh,
Again.
I think we've all been there.
So one day, my buddy and I, that were lifeguards, were sitting in the chair high above the pool, and a couple of girls, teenage girls,
Mm.
kept splashing us and throwing water on us when they'd come out of the pool. And we're trying to look buff with our sunscreen or our oiled bodies and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Back before people knew that oiling,
Yeah.
yeah, makes sense.
Didn't like getting wet. Kept telling them, no, no, no. Well, they
Which-
just didn't listen to us.
Which made it more fun
Yeah.
because you're telling them not to do it. Okay.
So when the pool was getting ready to close down for the day, and people were going into the locker rooms to change in their civilian clothes and stuff and go back home, my buddy and I got together and said, when those girls come out of the locker room, they're going in the water. That we'll get even with them. So the first one comes out and grabbed her. She's got her clothes on, her hair's all nice and dry. Throw her in the pool. She was screaming mad.
I bet.
Well, we found out the next day when we were called into the sergeant's office who was in charge of lifeguards, that wasn't such a good idea because ends up that girl was the daughter of the post sergeant major.
Oh, so not like a middle management type guy.
Not an E5 or an E6 or
Yeah.
an E7 or he was the top sergeant
So
major
command sergeant major.
of the post. Yeah.
So you threw the command sergeant major's daughter in the pool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a good decision.
Probably not.
So we lost our position as lifeguards because he demanded that we lose our position as lifeguards. And when a sergeant major tells a E5 sergeant in charge of lifeguards, these guys are gone,
You're gone.
we're gone.
Okay, so you went from the field, dusty field artillery work to cushy lifeguard job. Thought it'd be a great idea. Threw a girl in the pool. Now you are no longer a lifeguard. Back artillery?
They sent us back, not the same unit I came from, a different unit, but same position,
Okay.
artillery surveyor.
That sucks.
Well, it really sucked because I found out after a week in that unit just got orders to go to Vietnam.
Oh no.
Gee, I don't know if the sergeant major knew that unit was going to Vietnam.
I get a feeling that he probably knew before they got their deployment orders. So if you had stayed a lifeguard, you would have stayed on post for your contract.
Yes.
So by throwing this girl in the pool, which was real funny at the time,
Well,
you signed up to go to Vietnam.
we weren't that experienced at that pool because we had just started. So we didn't know that was the sergeant major's daughter, or we probably would not have done that.
That I would hope not. Okay, so you have now thrown a girl in the pool. You get dressed down pretty good, and you get put in a unit that is now headed to Vietnam.
Yep.
Okay.
The first troop carrying ship out of where did we go? Out of San Francisco to go to Vietnam.
So you were early you went over early then.
We were the first ship to go over there full of troops. Yeah, there were other advisors over there from the U.S. military, but no
GIs, no base troops.
GI, right?
Okay.
So that was our position.
So you really stepped in it.
So I remember the ship was so crowded that, I didn't really know what the term meant, or didn't even know the term back then until I talked to your experience in the Navy, talking about having a hot bunk.
Oh, hot racking.
Hot racking.
Oh yeah, hot racking is when there are not enough beds on the ship for the number of people on the ship.
Right.
So you took turns.
3 shifts of hot racking.
Yep. 8 hours of sleep.
Yep.
3 people. That's a full 24-hour day.
Yeah.
So each person gets their turn. And if you don't sleep during that time, that's on you. So if you miss your sleep time, you get to wait till the next one because somebody else is in your bed. It's not your bed.
And I wasn't the smallest guy, but guess who had the top bunk? My life was getting turned around real quick.
Okay. So from cushy lifeguarding job to now you are on a troop ship, hot racking, 3 shifts, on your way over to Vietnam.
Yep. And then after a couple of nights of doing that, hot racking, I learned to find a place on deck
Yep.
that I could hide in and just lean against a wall and go to sleep there.
And I will say that one thing, a lot of things from the military I take away that were useful, but being able to sleep anywhere is definitely one of them. No matter what the situation is, no matter what noise levels there are, no matter what's going on, if I find a wall or something to lean on, I can go right to bed.
Yeah.
Now you just go to bed.
I do that now. I don't even go to bed. Put me on a couch and I don't even have to lay down. I just sit down.
Just close your,
I know age.
Yeah, that's an age thing though. Okay. So you were on your way over to Vietnam. You get to Vietnam. How long did it take on the boat?
Oh, God, I'm trying to remember. We were dead in the water for probably 4 to 5 days.
That's not good.
Some part in the ship, I don't know what part it was, but they had to airdrop a part we needed to repair the ship engine.
Yeah.
To be able to finish the transport to Vietnam. But that was probably 4 or 5 days waiting in the water. That was a lot of fun.
So the transit was maybe a week, but then you add another, another week because
of a couple of weeks
breakdown. Okay.
But all I can remember is watching old movies on television of, World War II,
okay,
World War I, and you watch these movies of beach landings where, the
people are just getting mowed down.
Yeah, like
that's a great thing to watch.
The ship
as a
is out
person.
in the base somewhere, and these guys are getting motored in smaller
landing crafts
and getting shot at coming on the beach. And that's kind of what most of us were thinking was going to happen.
Wait, so the military was showing you old videos of landings?
No, they didn't show them. I remember seeing those when I was growing up.
Okay, I was going to say this would be an awful thing for them to put on the boat for the people going over. Okay, so this is just from your recollection. Okay.
That's what I thought it was going to be like when we got there.
That makes sense.
So when we get there, nothing at all like that. Ship ended up being kind of like going to Catalina almost in the West Coast.
Okay.
The ship's close to the shore, but not at a dock or anything. But we had to be, landing craft took us up to the dock and
Yeah.
let us off. And it was like no big fanfare, no guns, no nothing. In fact, there was a city right next to where we landed. And I can't think of the name of that city, but it wasn't that far from Saigon. And because we were on that side of the ocean, we get off the landing craft. They put us in deuce and a half trucks and
Yeah.
ship us off to the areas we're assigned to. My first assignment for our base camp was called Fuloy. And it was about 50 miles kind of north and trying to think northwest of Saigon.
Okay.
We're out in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of the jungle.
Was it like active combat zone yet? Or is
No,
that still
no.
far enough back where there's nothing really
There
going
was
on?
nothing going on right there. There were
Okay.
small villages that we would drive through, but nothing where we ended up. And there was no gunfire, no nothing. But everybody had warned us to be careful, keep your eyes open, all that kind of, but nothing. It was all non-dramatic.
Right.
So we get there, end up having to do a lot of our clearing ourselves. There were no engineers there yet with their bulldozers and stuff to level the land.
Sure.
So till they got there for us, it's probably a good month or 6 weeks that we had to just put our tents up anywhere we could and out in the jungle area. So trying to think, they get there, they level out a big area for us. We have a perimeter set up, a lot of barbed wire going up,
Sure.
a lot of stuff going on, but they
So
need.
is this more like a forward operating base that you're trying to build, or is this still far enough back from the front that
It's far
a
enough
support
back
base?
from. There wasn't really a front in Vietnam
okay?
ever.
Okay.
That was another thing the movies kind of
Portray.
portrayed as far as the other wars prior to this. But Vietnam was a lot of hit and escape as far as the enemy goes.
Okay.
They'd ambush you. By the time you figured out what was going on and started firing back,
They're gone. Okay.
And that's when they had the tunnel system going and stuff.
Yeah. Makes sense.
But we had to start surveying places they were going to put the guns in when they got there, the 105s, the 155s and stuff, which is probably a couple hundred meters away from where we were going to have the tents and the other stuff put up. So they needed other areas surveyed. So they were looking for experienced land surveyors, which we didn't have any in our outfit.
Because you were just used to the surveying that was for the artillery,
For the
not
artillery.
for like general construction or
Map construction, that kind
Okay.
of stuff. So it turns out the maps that were left behind by the French weren't accurate enough for our military
okay.
as far as guns or as far as roads. And where we were, there'd be a road by our camp going into a jungle tree plantation somewhere. And the road would come out, 15, 20 miles away. But as far as what went on under those trees wasn't visible from the air.
Okay.
Well, back then they had no satellite imaging.
Right.
And
Even the aerial photography probably wasn't
Couldn't
good
pick it up.
enough. You couldn't see it through the jungle canopy.
so they needed surveyors to go in and survey the road so that the U.S. would have their own maps, compare them to the French maps. So if you had units going down the road, they were trying to call in airstrikes and stuff, they would have accurate numbers to go by.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't want necessarily, if you're calling an air support and there's a road between point A and B, you don't want to be dropping ordnance
No.
if the road might be going through that part of the map.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when I was at Santa Ana Junior College, I had experience because I had taken a couple of classes in surveying because I was thinking about maybe becoming a surveyor in Orange County.
Okay,
So I knew
the basics.
the basics for map making and surveying that. So I got that job.
Okay, so going back, you couldn't join the Navy because it was too dangerous. So you joined the Army, which is more dangerous. Then you're one of the first people over on the ground
Yeah.
constructing these bases. And then now you're up forward even further, surveying roads where nobody can see you in a hostile area. Okay, so that worked out great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so
All because I threw a girl in the pool.
okay.
Anyway,
And you didn't stay in school.
no.
Okay. So we're doing road surveying now.
Going through this jungle area, and there were a couple of times that, yeah, we were ambushed a couple of times, but luckily for me, I never got shot. Got shot at, I'm sure, but not shot.
Yeah.
Remember driving one of the deuce and a half trucks down the road. Probably the scariest experience I had, maybe the second. While I was there, I'm driving, and the front seat passenger, we're going through this one area. All of a sudden, I didn't hear anything except he grabbed me on my shoulder and pulled me down and said, "Go, go, go." And just as he had pulled me down from,
So you were driving.
I was driving.
Okay.
Just as he had pulled me down, shots started ringing out. The windshield.
So you don't have to go into this if you don't want to. It's fine. I know it's a lot.
If he hadn't pulled me down, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And he got shot in the back, and he didn't make it.
Mm. How much longer did you have in your enlistment at that point? Where are we at chronologically? Because you had, a year left when you went. Is that right? Do you need a minute?
Yeah, give me a minute.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. Take your time.
I don't tell that story too often. Okay.
All right. So how much longer did we have at that point when you were...
I was probably only in Vietnam, I don't know, less than 2 months. So I still had
a good amount of time
a good
left.
amount of time left there. So it was building the base camp. It was going out on these survey expeditions. But we had infantrymen around us while we were surveying.
Okay.
But as we learned, it didn't do that much good sometimes because the tunnel traps that the Viet Cong had were within the perimeter of the infantry guys.
Okay. So they would be set up for protection,
Yeah.
but where the openings were from the tunnel systems were actually inside that perimeter.
Right.
Okay.
And so the more we found that out, caused the perimeter to be tight and tight and
Sure.
tight. And then they'd put more infantry guys out with us and stuff. But that went on probably 2-3 months that I did that kind of surveying. And you'd be out there away from base camp probably a week at a time. And then you could go back to base camp and spend 1 or 2 nights and go back out in the field. Because you're in the field, you're not putting up camps really. You're sleeping on the ground. You're
In the
eating out-
jungle.
you're eating outside. It's a jungle.
So this goes on for a period of time.
And then we, after probably 7-8 months, we're given a break by what we call R&R, rest and relaxation. And back then, the only choice we had was go to Saigon or go to, can't even think. The country next to Vietnam, help me. Bangkok.
Thailand.
Thailand, yeah.
Okay, so you could go to Bangkok, Thailand,
Or Saigon.
or Saigon, Vietnam.
That was our two choices for R&R.
Well, I assume you're in Vietnam, so you chose
Bangkok.
Thailand because it's not Vietnam.
Right.
Okay.
So I got to spend a week in Thailand, in
Okay.
Bangkok. Come back, and then I've got maybe 3-4 months left. Well, it turned out it was supposed to be a 12-year commitment in Vietnam. But because the person that was going to replace me is the head surveyor for the surveying party was delayed, I spent 2 extra months. So I was there 14 months.
Okay, so 14 months was your total time in Vietnam.
In country, right.
Okay.
So the whole time I was there, did a lot of flying in helicopters as a passenger,
Okay.
going from point to point. And I really got a bug for learning to fly, wanting to fly them.
So, quick question: since most people that are younger that weren't there, the only exposure we have is movies.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have movies like Apocalypse Now or any of the other Vietnam era movies, like was it anything like that at all? Was the flying similar? Did they do a lot of formation flying?
It wasn't that similar when I was there, but again, I was there at the beginning.
Okay.
And looking back, I think the Viet Cong thought, these guys don't know what they're doing. They won't be here that long. You know, the French were here how many years, but they left. The U.S. isn't going to stick around. This, you know, so the first buildup, I don't think the really heavy crap started until like around 1965, 66, 67.
When they started to realize we weren't leaving right away.
Right.
Okay. So you got in and out before a lot of that
Right.
more aggression and buildup had
Right.
occurred.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I agree. Because, like you said, there's a decent chance that I may not be here. So,
So I get out of Vietnam and going home. Before we went, I had applied to go to Warrant Officer Flight School because I wanted to learn how to fly helicopters.
and in the Army, warrant officers fly helicopters.
Right.
Okay. So
So-
those are still technically enlisted positions, correct? I think warrant officers is like one of those pseudo in between.
It's in between, but they have officer privileges as far as officers club, that kind
Right.
of stuff when you go
Okay.
to bases. So I had applied to go. I come back to the United States and find out, you know, you've been approved to do it, to go to Warrant Officer Flight School, but you've got to sign a intent to re-enlist commitment in order for us to put you through flight school.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, coming back from Vietnam, it didn't make sense.
Okay. I understand. Let me clarify. When in the military, and for anyone else that doesn't know, when you go into the military and they put you through additional schooling, in order to get their money's worth by putting you through that, they usually make you sign a 1 year, a 2 year, and depending on how involved that schooling is,
Right.
the extension is equally as long, so they can get their value from doing that.
I would have to do, after flight school, spend 3 more years,
Okay, so it would have been an extra 3 years after
whatever the time commitment was for flight school. And
Prob-
stuff.
maybe a year or two. I'm not
Yeah.
familiar with flight school,
It
but
would
it
have
would be
been
probably
another-
5 or 6 year commitment.
Right.
Okay.
And after having been in Vietnam and seen a couple of my friends not make it back and hearing the stories about the ones that got shot down in helicopters,
The treatment in the camps.
yeah, I thought this may not be the best decision for me right now.
So if you hadn't been in country yet and you had that opportunity, would you have probably done it if you
Yeah.
hadn't had that 14-month experience in country?
Probably.
Because you wouldn't have known. You would have just heard stories. And
Yeah.
so living through it in country, you're like, absolutely not,
I'm not going back.
not doing it. I can understand that.
I really don't know how the guys do it now, or even, going over to Afghanistan and all that stuff
I was
3,
gonna say,
4 times.
Yeah, anybody that signed up post 9/11 right? We were in country in Afghanistan for 20 something years.
Yeah, but
So you knew if you signed up after 9/11 that you were going to be flying sorties in Iraq or Afghanistan.
back and forth. And you go there for a year, come home for a year. You're going back for a year.
Sometimes 18 months because deployments were getting extended. There was all kinds of
Yeah.
craziness going on.
I mean, I can't imagine what it would have been like going back to Vietnam. I know guys did go back a couple, 3 times,
Yeah.
but I didn't want to throw the dice that much.
I mean, you get that a lot with guys that are used to being in units, right? Like
Right.
Patrick, you know,
Right.
like you get guys that have multiple Purple Hearts that just want to go back in country with their guys because their guys are still there.
Yeah.
And like that respect to the people that do that. Like I was on a ship. So like I was about as insulated as you can get from the Afghani and Iraqi militaries.
You know, most of the time being in a small survey party situation, you're out there with, 5, 8, 10 guys. That's your group
Yeah.
doing your surveying. So you're not back at base camp with hundreds of guys. And I don't know. It's just, I didn't want to go back.
I can't blame you. That for just being a little biased and selfish, I think it was the right choice because
So because of my experience in Vietnam at the time, instead of going to flight school, they said, what else would you like to do? I said, I'd like to go to Germany. That's where I wanted to get reassigned was,
sure.
well, you still don't have enough time to get out of country to have us send you there. So tell you what we're going to do. We're going to assign you to the Panama Canal.
Okay. So you go from the jungles of Vietnam
To the
to
jungles.
Panama.
Yeah, the Panama Canal to help teach other soldiers and special forces what it's like in Vietnam, because that's the environment they have there in Panama Canal.
Sure.
So that's what I did for my last 7 or 8 months in the military, was spinning the Panama Canal zone, which
Being
was
an
like,
advisor
being an
and
advisor.
a trainer.
Yeah.
Okay.
After that, I said, I'm not going back.
So have you been back to Panama?
No.
Oh. Do you have any desire to go back to Panama?
No.
Okay.
If I'm on a ship and they want to go through the Panama Canal, I'll fly over it.
Fair enough.
No, but it was an experience. It helps you grow.
Yeah. We
Why?
are
Wiser.
a culmination of our experiences. So you're out, you get out of the service.
Yeah. Remember flying home, and I didn't have it as bad early coming back like that. That the longer the war went on, the more guys we lost over there,
Yeah.
the more our country didn't like.
They got mad. They
They
stopped
got mad.
supporting it.
Yeah, they didn't want us to be there at all. And
Yeah.
they felt the guys that were going there were doing the wrong thing. They should have opted to go to Canada or,
Yeah.
if
Or you get the what do they call them?
Draft
Conscientious
dodgers.
objectors, the draft dodgers.
Yeah. So I didn't have a lot of upset people with me from the area I lived in, but I did hear stories of guys going back to bigger cities like Los Angeles or
Yeah.
San Diego, where they got really looked down upon if they knew you were former military and
Coming back from Vietnam.
coming back. Yeah. So,
So all the hippies that were protesting,
Oh yeah. So if you go back to college and you're in a class,
you don't tell people.
you don't tell people what your experiences were.
So you had to hide the fact.
You don't talk about it.
Okay. Because at the time, the general sentiment was very anti-war.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I did go out for football again.
So you're back at,
Santa Ana Junior College,
you went back to the same school.
same school.
Did you have to meet the academic requirements before college, or did they take your prior military so you got to go out again?
They took the prior military. I didn't have to get the grades back up. They gave me what do you call it?
An exemption?
Yeah, an exemption, and said, if your grades start going down this semester, then you won't be eligible for football. So I kept my grades up while I was playing football,
Okay.
where the prior experience was they didn't watch them that close.
Yeah.
So you just played football.
So you matured a little bit, came back, focused more on academics because you learned the first time if you don't watch your academics, you don't get to play sports.
Right.
So second time, you're like, hey, let's learn, focus on your academics so you can stay in football.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're back in football now.
Well, it turns out that football players and the coaches especially, once found out that I had been to Vietnam, they loved that. It
Okay.
wasn't people looking down on me. It was like, you've been over there. You went and fought this and you're back.
So from the general public did not like it,
No.
but in sports or in athletics, they looked at it as a positive.
Yeah, you're a survivor.
Okay.
So help us survive this next
Practice.
game. Practice game.
Okay.
Whatever. That was the way they looked at it.
So their thought is you were over it. You must have the grit, the determination, the survival instincts, help bring that to the team,
Mm-hmm.
make the team better, maybe bring some of that wisdom.
It turns out, I think there's like 4 of us on the team that year that had prior Vietnam experience.
Okay.
So we didn't go to the Rose Bowl, but we had a better team.
But so you're back in college football at this point. So
Yeah.
you're back in football.
Academics were good. And when I graduated with an AA from San Antonio Junior College, I applied and got accepted down to San Diego State to go down there to go to school and play football.
Okay.
That was
Were they the Aztecs still?
Oh,
Was
yeah.
that
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
So that's been their name the whole time.
Yeah,
Okay.
Don Coryell was the coach. So I go down, graduate from San Antonio JC, go down for preseason workouts at San Diego State, end up getting injured during preseason practices to the point where I couldn't play. So
complete. Okay. So you finally made it back to play ball. Graduate JC, go to which also, did you ever tell me that you were going to go to San Diego State? I don't know if I knew that because that's where I originally went to school.
that's why you went there.
Is it? Okay, fair enough.
We made that decision for you.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. But so you went to go play ball at San Diego State, but got injured in the preseason.
So that required knee surgery at the time. Tore the meniscus in my left knee. And at that time, they didn't do arthroscopy type surgery.
Yeah,
They opened the knee up
completely.
to repair a torn meniscus. So then they, after the surgery, would put your leg in a cast
Yeah.
for several weeks. And then it took so much longer to recover from that, even with physical therapy. I missed the whole season. And after that, I just never went back to the sport, never went back to San Diego State. And
So you completely dropped out at that point.
yeah.
Okay. What were you originally going to school for?
Well, at San Diego State, I was going to have a physical education major.
Okay. So you wanted to be a coach.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that. And as it turns out, dropped out. Didn't go to school that semester. Didn't play football. Came back home and started working on cars again. And I'm trying to think. Worked as
Is this where the 69 El Camino came in, or was this before that?
that was before that. Just a little before that. But
So you started wrenching on cars again.
I started wrenching on cars. A friend of mine had an auto body shop. That's right. Yeah, Ray Roach. Fitch's Auto Body Service.
So you started working on cars again because you had originally worked on your 40 Ford, and that was just for you.
Yeah.
So you had never done repair work for anybody else.
No.
Okay.
So I go to Ray Roach, gives me a job in his shop. Started working for him in Costa Mesa. And turning wrench with him, found out that he was making pretty good money working on cars.
Okay.
So I thought, I don't need a college to do this.
Right.
I can learn by experience. So
It's a lot of trade jobs, right? A lot of trade jobs, you don't necessarily need a college degree.
right. So I worked a year for him, and then I decided I wanted to try and open my own business. So I left Ray before having plans in concrete. Found it harder to find a shop. It was harder to open up your own business than I thought.
Okay. I mean, a lot of times when we think something, you see someone else do something, you think it's easier than it probably is. So
Yes.
you see him running a business, making good money.
Making good money, but I was making minimum money because I was doing a lot of work for him.
Well, you're an employee,
Yeah, an employee.
right? So you saw him making money as an owner. You thought you got to own a business if you want to make money.
Exactly.
Okay. So you went to go try to open your own shop.
Yeah, and this gas station I used to go to get gas in Costa Mesa, talking to him one day, he had a 2-bay Union 76 station on Harbor Boulevard, and I never saw any work going on in the bays.
So
No.
they're just sitting empty.
Not even oil changes, nothing. He would just sit in the front room there and wait for gas customer to come in and go out and wait on the gas customer. He was the only owner-employee.
Yeah.
So I talked to him one day. I said, how about you rent me your bays and I'll pay you a percentage of what I make back there if I can work. So he did.
Okay. So you saw an opportunity. You saw something not being utilized. And instead of having to start from scratch yourself, you said, hey,
Yeah, the building was
let
there.
me help you.
I had all my own tools already, but he had the lifts in place, and you're there with oil and all the additives you needed. So I started doing oil changes and minor repairs and then tune-ups and stuff like that. So did that for close to a year.
So was that all stuff that you already kind of knew how to do, or
Yeah.
were you kind of learning as you did it?
No, I knew how to do most of it just from another thing. When I was in high school, I passed over a little bit. It was 3 years in high school. I had an elective class I took, auto shop.
Okay. So you had some experience there from auto shop.
Yeah, 3 years of auto shop. They don't have that anymore in high school.
No, I mean, that's the other thing too, is they've completely eliminated most of those classes, the trade classes
Yeah.
from schools. Okay. So you had 3 years of auto shop from school.
Right.
Okay.
So I knew how to do brake jobs, knew how to do tune-ups and minor repairs. It doesn't take much to figure out how to take a radiator out of a car if you need to take the radiator out and replace
Yep.
it. It's just step by step.
Just see what's
YouTube.
connected, disconnect it. And
Didn't have YouTube back then, but
I
take
tell you,
notes.
nowadays,
You can do
YouTube
anything.
University.
You can do anything.
Yeah. You can find a video of someone's done it.
I do.
Yeah. We do when we've done brakes on my current car.
Yeah.
And when you've done brakes on some of my other vehicles.
Yeah. So doing that, he came to me one day and he goes, you better start looking for a different place to do your business because I'm getting ready to sell the gas station. I said, really? I said, how much you want for it? He gave me a price and I said, how about if I buy it? He goes, you can afford that? And I go, no, but I'll get the money somehow.
You'll find a way.
Ended up paying him what we called back then blue sky because he had nothing to sell. He was just pumping gas. He didn't have customers really.
Right.
I'm the one that had the customers in the back room and I wanted to keep them. So paid him his blue sky, kept that, learned that right across the street from me was a car dealership called Earl Ike Toyota. And they sold used cars that needed smog checks.
Because at the time, California, had they just started doing
Yeah, pretty
smog
much.
requirements?
Smog requirements.
Okay. So a lot of people don't know what that is. So in California, it's real dumb, but the environmental rules there is it every year or 2 years?
Every time you register the car.
Okay. So if it's a yearly
I'm
thing.
sorry, every 2 years back then, yeah.
Okay. So every 2 years, or if you were selling a car, it had to
Yeah.
be done before it was sold.
Right.
It had to get an emissions check. So they would stick something down the tailpipe, take some measurements,
They still do it.
do some adjustments and tune-ups.
Yeah.
Okay. So you knew that there was a need. The need was this dealership needs smog checks.
So I took the classes and got licensed to do smog checks.
Smart.
And then I got the equipment to do the smog checks on a lease basis, but it didn't take long to pay those off because I was making at the time, Earl Ike Toyota was paying me $50 per smog check. And at the time I could do 5 or 6 a day easy.
Okay.
And I didn't take more than 15, 20 minutes each. So I was making good money doing just that in between my tune-ups or brake jobs or
Oil changes or
new
whatever
tires.
miscellaneous.
So I was making good money on that small station.
Yeah.
And got to the point where I wanted to expand. I'd heard from the grapevine that a dealer that I used to work for when I was going to college, I keep jumping around here. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
These things keep coming back to mind. I used to work at a Shell station in Corona del Mar, a beach community that was a 24-hour station. So the dealer, it was a great location coming down MacArthur Boulevard to Coast Highway. People would have to turn left to go to Corona del Mar State Beach. Well, after they make the left turn, 2 blocks later on the right side is this Shell station I ended up getting into. But people would stop there for gas, so when they left the beach to go home, they had a full tank of gas.
Yeah.
So I worked there on graveyard shift for this guy, Dick Williams, that he found out that I could do mechanical stuff. So he would make appointments for his gas customers to bring their cars in at night during my graveyard shift to get oil changes, tune-ups, brake jobs, because there was no traffic on Coast Highway at midnight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in
Sure.
the morning. So nobody's buying
So
gas.
so he's setting up customers to get other sources of revenue. So you're doing oil changes, brake jobs overnight.
But he had to keep the station open 24 hours because of his contract with Shell,
Okay.
which made no sense. But
So Shell is the one that made him
Stay
have a
open.
24-hour business.
Right.
Okay. So instead, he found a way to make revenue overnight when
Right.
normally no one's buying gas.
So I worked for him for almost 2 years, making good money for him. And again, I'm not making fantastic money. I'm
Because
an
you're
hourly
an employee.
I'm an hourly employee.
Yep.
So when I had the 76 station, I'd heard through the grapevine that Dick Williams was getting ready to sell his Shell oil station. And I thought, that's a better location, much better location, more money in that area than there is up in Costa Mesa. So
Sure.
went
Still
down.
is.
Yeah, it still is. So I went down and talked to him. Heard you wanted to sell. What would it take to buy? He goes, why? I said, well, I'm thinking about maybe wanting to buy it. And he goes, well, if you're the buyer, just pay me for what I have in inventory as far as tires, batteries, accessories,
Okay.
and it's yours. And I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, you could get good money for blue sky if you wanted to. He goes, no, you were a great employee for me for a couple of years when you were here.
Sure.
He goes, you made good money for me back then. He says, it's my turn to turn the favor around. So he gave me the station for whatever it costs to
For items in inventory.
items in inventory, which was great for me.
It saved you the expense of everything else.
So that led on to buying that station. And I had 2 stations, which meant twice as much problems, I guess you'd say, having to hire employees to run things.
Well, you can't run both yourself.
No, and you can't work on cars both yourself. So I'd have to hire a mechanic, hire guys at that time, kids. It was a great job for kids after high school was out, junior college kids, that kind of stuff. You didn't find the married man wanting to come in and buy or come in and pump gas at that time.
Sure.
Couldn't afford to pay them what they wanted. So I'd have one employee as a mechanic. I would be a backup mechanic, watching the work they turned out, making sure it was the quality I wanted.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. So then later on, the 76 station was going to be sold. The property was, I'm sorry. I owned the station, but not the property.
Okay. So you had the surface rights. Basically, you didn't even have the surface rights. The land belonged to somebody else.
Right. And they ended up selling that land to Earl Ike Toyota, who was right across the side street there.
Okay.
They needed the property for inventory, parking, that kind of.
Yeah.
They
So they didn't want to keep the station there.
No.
Okay.
No. They wanted the station gone. So I got out of there, had the one Shell station, and then found out There was another Shell station for sale in Laguna Hills in the Lake Forest area. So Laguna Niguel, I'm sorry. Ended up wanting to buy that station. So I'm going back to 2 stations, but this time I was going to need a partner because the amount of money needed to buy it was going to be so much. I applied.
You couldn't borrow it on your own.
I did apply for a large SBA loan, which I got approved for, but still needed some money going in. So I had a partner go in with me. But at the time, the money I borrowed, interest rates were, I think, 18% back then. 19%.
So in the 80s, this was savings and loan crisis had happened. Interest rates were sky high.
So I was paying 2 3/4 above prime. So I was paying 22% interest on a multi-$100,000 loan.
Yeah. So now, like, people think interest rates are high now.
No.
Like, they're high now relative to maybe 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the people nowadays, if they're younger, like my age and younger, they don't understand 20% interest rates.
It's high.
Yeah, like 7%, 6 and 7%, like we're seeing now, is high relative to like 10 years ago. But 20% on $100,000, that's you're paying 20 grand in interest a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's before you pay principal. So you're paying a significant amount in interest on that borrowed money.
At the time, my station in Laguna Niguel was netting over $10,000 a month.
Okay.
Net.
Okay. And that's because you didn't have to borrow the money for that station.
Right.
Okay.
So, but still, the money I had to pay the SBA loan back on was what I was making. So I did borrow the money on the SBA loan to get that station. So my payback on that was my monthly income on that station. So I had nothing.
So your net on that new station was zero.
Going to the bank.
So you were working a lot more.
For the bank.
Okay. So might have given you a little bit of a sour flavor. Which
eventually caused me to get out of the business.
So do you think, and this is just speculating, but if you had just stayed with the one station instead of trying to scale?
Well, the station in Corona Del Mar ended up, Shell was going to want to buy the property. Well, I found out that one of my customers at that station owned the property in Laguna Niguel. They didn't own the property, the one in Corona Del Mar. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'll buy the property. Found out that when she signed the deal with Shell for the Laguna Niguel station, they neglected to get the first right of refusal for that property.
So she didn't have to ask them when she sold the property.
So my thinking was leave Shell in Corona Del Mar, take over the bigger station in Laguna Niguel, and if I could get a first right of refusal from her for that property, which I ended up getting because, again, before I knew she owned the property, I just did her great service working on her car all the time in Corona Del Mar without knowing she owned that property.
And that's a good lesson, and you never know the person that you're talking to, the person you're walking next to, the driving next to. You never really know who they are. So
once I started doing the research on that station and I saw the name on the property owner, I go, wait a minute, she's my customer in Corona Del Mar. So I talked to her one day. What it would take how much would you want to put me down as first right of refusal? How much can I offer? She goes, no offer. I'll just do it. Because
because you built that relationship, had done the work,
without knowing who she was or that she owned that property. So I got the first right of refusal, which ended up later Shell found out about that, and they were ticked off at me for
because they wanted it.
They wanted it because I wanted to put a car wash in there, and they wouldn't do it. They go, well, how about if we just get rid of the station? I put a car wash in there. Well, you can't do that. Well, I own the property, or I could own the property. No, you can't. I said, well, you better look at your deed or whatever you have on your business plan because you don't have first right of refusal. I do. So if you want to offer, Ruth Lennon the money for that land,
You can say no.
yeah, and she finds out that I want it and not you, I don't care. You're not going to get it.
Right.
So then I found out I was going to try and buy the Corona Del Mar station, but to make a private station out of it. But at the time, it had too many underground gas fuel tank leaks. These large storage tanks for fuel were leaking into
Yep.
the ground. And it was going to cost, again, in excess of $1 million to replace the tanks.
Which back then, $1 million actually meant something.
Yeah. Yeah. So I walked away from that deal because that was going to close me down anyway. So I just walked away from that station, took my inventory to Laguna Niguel and put it in that station. So I just had the one station, but still that one station was busy enough. It kept me busy 24 hours a day almost. Not only was it the gas station auto repair, I had the AAA towing contract for the area. And I had a couple of tow trucks there, which meant I had to have tow truck drivers. So I had to hire more employees for that and making good money. But there were times, especially when it was raining, AAA couldn't find my tow truck drivers on the radio. So they'd call me at home and I'd have to drive down there in the middle of the night.
Because you had the contract, you had to do it.
Yeah.
But because the driver you had hired to do it wasn't
He
responding,
wasn't answering his pager, right?
but it's your business, so you're ultimately responsible.
You're right.
So you're getting up in the middle of the night as the owner, now doing the job of the employee.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just too difficult to find good drivers at the time? Was it?
Well, I don't think I ever found a good one, but
Fair enough.
but yeah, it was. If the weather was good, you could find them. If the weather was bad, you couldn't find them. And I don't know. It was a headache in a way, and I was working a lot, and unfortunately, not. I was away from the house a lot.
Yeah.
So your mom, my wife, was doing a lot of the raising the kids and working full time, and so we had you and your brother in daycare before schools.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you remember those days.
Oh, yeah.
So I could just see what it was doing to the family. And I made a decision, talked to your mom.
Yeah.
And said, I've got to give this business up. I can't handle it.
So the amount of the hours, the extra stress, the late nights, sometimes having to get up in the middle of the night, drive tow truck, like all of that.
Well, I could see where it was going.
Well, and at the time, if you had really high interest loans and you're paying most of the money to the bank anyway, you're really not seeing the benefit and you're just doing a lot of work.
And I could see what it was doing to her,
Yeah.
my wife. And so I said, I'm making a decision. I'm selling everything, but she said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'd like to become a police officer. She goes, well, I had been a reserve police officer in Irvine for 2.5 years before this point.
Okay.
I'd gone through the Reserve Academy and did that spiel. And at the end of the Reserve Academy, was given the opportunity to go through the Extended Academy, which meant if you decide to go full time as a police officer, you won't have to go through the academy again.
Okay. So it would be an easy transition.
It'd be an easy transition. But I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to be a police officer.
Yeah,
full
you own a
time.
gas station.
I own a
you
gas.
own- turns out.
2 years later. So she said, okay, but I don't want you to be a police officer anywhere except Irvine. I said, if I can't get hired by Irvine, then I won't be one.
I was going to say, I mean, really looking back at it, at least growing up when, like during my youth, like I think there and maybe Newport, like there really wasn't many cities that would have been a good choice.
No.
So like definitely not LA, definitely not Santa Ana, definitely not like Fullerton, any of the other, probably Costa Mesa, any of them.
Anaheim. A lot of these cities, the police departments were good. I'm not saying they weren't, but their population, Anaheim, because of Disneyland, there's a lot of tourists.
Yeah.
Where's the other one? Same thing in Newport Beach, Corona Del Mar, Newport, Seal Beach.
People going to the beach,
A lot of tourists,
tourism.
summer people. With Irvine, it was its own community set apart from these vacation spots that was just starting to grow.
Hmm. So you liked the community aspect. You liked knowing the people that you were
Yeah.
policing. You liked knowing the community. It didn't change
Right.
seasonally like that. So you had a good idea. If you knew a good part of town, bad part of town, you got to know the people.
There wasn't a lot of high crime in Irvine at the
Yeah.
time. Other cities, you had bad guys coming in from outside the city, so you really didn't have a history with them.
Yeah.
In Irvine, you catch the bad guys a couple of times and you start a history with them, and you know their method of operation, and next time they come in, you know who it is, and you go take care of it.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So I got hired by Irvine, but had to go through the full-time academy because I didn't do the extended academy. So I was 40 years old at this time.
Which, if I remember right, was also your badge number for a while. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why
So
I got
40.
that badge number.
So you were 40 going through the police academy.
Exactly. With a bunch of 20-year-olds. But, I made it through.
Yeah.
And did all the physical activity they did. All the push-ups and the pull-ups and the
Fireman
running.
carry.
Yeah, the running.
Yeah.
Ran a lot when I could run back then.
Even with the post-knee surgery, you can still run.
Yeah.
Okay.
So got hired by them, went through the full academy, and hit the streets. And back then, coming 40 years old into Irvine Police Department, you're assigned a graveyard shift.
Mm.
There's no choice. There's no hierarchy. It's just you're going to graveyards. Okay.
Although it's better than the sheriff because you know where they start.
Yeah, jail.
They start in the county jail. So would you have rather started in the county jail or graveyards in Irvine?
Well, that's why I chose Irvine.
Okay. Makes sense.
So it was probably a good 2.5, 3 years to get off graveyard shift.
Serve your time.
Serve your time.
Yep.
Don't ask why, just do what you're told. And so I'd had guys in their 30s, high 20s, 30s sergeants that started with the department because Irvine was a fairly new department.
Yeah.
Tell me what to do all the time, and you just do it.
Just check your ego.
Yes, sir. No, sir.
You're older than them. You have more experience than them, but positionally they were above you. So you just
Do it.
do it.
So once I got off graveyards, went into patrol, and then they found out my mechanical background pretty much over the time that I'd worked there. So I went into commercial enforcement, which I just loved that position.
Yep.
Working with the big trucks coming through the community and stuff. And after commercial enforcement, I love working with kids. So I saw a need.
Because we were such great kids.
Yeah. Well, you guys were, middle school then? So I could see some of the problems going on in the schools because you weren't bringing it home, but just talking to you about other kids in the school, that they need some guidance more than the teachers can give them.
Yeah.
So I said, a lot of the kids were starting to get into trouble in the community. So I researched the school resource officer program that started up in Florida.
Okay.
And
Which is where they assign police officers to schools.
To the schools. And that's your assignment. You don't answer police calls unless there's a real emergency in your area. So I put a program together, went to the command staff and presented they said, well, before I put the program together, I went to the command staff and talked to them about it. They said, well, if you think it's necessary, put a program together and come present to the command staff.
Yeah.
The staff meeting, and we'll see what happens. So I did that myself, and we had officers going to the school for crime reports, but no one officer going to the same school all the time.
You didn't have that relationship.
Right.
Yeah. Same face.
So myself and one female officer worked with me. We ended up doing the presentation, got it approved. And so we were assigned as the first two school resource officers in Irvine Police Department.
So at the time, were any of the other neighboring departments doing those programs?
No.
Or was Irvine?
Irvine was the first.
Okay.
So at the time, there were 3 high schools in Irvine, University, Woodbridge, and Irvine High. And each high school had a couple of them had 2 middle schools feeding those high schools. So the intent was to put an officer in each high school. They couldn't afford to put an officer in each high school. So the 2 of us had to split time between one of the high schools. And then we each had I had to start with University High School and halftime at Woodbridge. She had Irvine High, halftime at Woodbridge. So 3 high schools, and then we split up our time with the middle schools when we could. So it proved after the first year to be very valuable.
Sure.
Because you go to...
Well, the kids get to see the police presence. They get to understand.
We're not just there to write tickets and arrest and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
But it helped as far as patrol officers go, because if they had a suspect in any crime and the suspect vehicle seen leaving the area was yada, 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 they'd put that out on the school resource officer network. And oh, yeah.
You know whose car that is.
Yeah. They'd be like, Dale Lawrence's 40 Ford. Yeah, that's it.
The 88 Astro van.
So, no, but it proved very valuable to learn the kids, the bad kids in school. It's, I don't know.
A few, usually.
It's hard to tell once they reach the high school level, but when we worked at the middle school level, and even when we had dare officers start the elementary school level, and we get input from them, it was pretty easy to tell in elementary school.
You could start to develop like a profile,
You
figure out.
You knew who the bad ones are going to be.
Yeah.
Just the way they act in school around authority and doing what they're supposed to. Anyway, you learned who the ones...
The trouble kids, who are going to be the problem kids. So if you identified them early, by the time they got to high school, you guys pretty much knew who they were.
Yeah. So that's...
And the 18 iPhones in their backpack, those were theirs.
Well, trying to think, did we have cell phones when you were going to school?
Maybe it wasn't iPhones at the time, but I think they were just starting to get pagers. And you also, I think, had early music, like MP3 players,
right?
Mini disc player. Like we're starting to see some of those, maybe Discmen, Walkmen, the early crimes.
The pagers were the big thing.
Well, I'm pretty sure. I mean, maybe this is just an assumption, but I'm pretty sure if a high schooler had a pager, they were probably dealing drugs.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, just throwing that out there.
So I retired as a school resource officer, and retired at 65.
So you spent 25 years doing law enforcement.
25 years in law enforcement. So at 65, I may have even gone another year or two, but I was, at the time, they had time frame commitment. If you're in a specialty, after 5 years, you had to go back to patrol for a year. Then you could rebid for that job. Well, what kept me in this SRO for so long was the fact that nobody wanted to be an SRO. They thought being around kids in school all day was just
terrible.
But when they saw how, after several years, how we were solving crimes, and 1 year
we got police officer of the year one year.
I did, because of several crimes I solved, just because of my knowledge of juvenile crime goers, who to go after. So once other officers saw
the recognition
successes, then a couple of them wanted to try it. So once people started wanting to get into it, I was told you got to go back to patrol for a year. I said, wait a minute, I'm 65 years old. You want me to drive a patrol car and do car stops and
chase,
foot
chases, and
no more foot chases.
No.
That was the other nice thing about being an SRO. Remember one time going to lunch at a local pizza place. What's one your brother worked at? Lamppost.
Before it was taken over and converted into something else.
Yeah. But remember the probation officer for the area and I were going to lunch at Lamppost. As we started to walk into the front door area, one of the kids that was on probation, who the probation officer had been looking for, came out the front door about the same time we were getting ready to go in, saw us, and just
Whoop.
took off running across the parking lot, across Barranca, which is a 4-lane street,
Not a small road.
into an apartment complex across the street. And both the probation officer and I, well, she was a female,
Yeah.
and we just looked at him and goes, "That's okay, run all you want. We know where you live."
Because you knew him.
Yeah, because
Okay.
we knew him. So, I don't know, the running days were over.
Yeah.
So once I was told I had to go back to patrol, I said, "No, I got another option. I'm just going to retire." So I turned in my retirement papers and retired.
And here you are.
I haven't been back to the PD except to go to other officers that I knew really well retire
Yeah.
or get promotions. I've got one SRO that I work real closely with who's gone through the ranks. He's now a lieutenant. So he went from SRO to sergeant to lieutenant, has had very good successes in the positions he's been in.
Sure.
All the SROs I worked with through the years I worked there, we still get together at least once a year at a poker party at this one individual's house.
Okay.
And we wanted to play poker like you do in Vegas, but nobody knew how to do it.
Okay.
So your brother, Michael, who's an excellent poker player
And goes to Vegas
and goes to Vegas a lot.
frequently. Yeah.
I brought him to one of our poker parties one night.
And he taught everyone.
He was the dealer, the banker, everything else, and was just really good at it. So now he comes to all of our poker parties.
That's fun. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty amusing.
So other than that, and we get together usually for lunch once a year.
So are all of the people that you were in with, are they pretty much all retired at this point? Or do you have a couple that
all
you still?
except for two.
All except for two?
One guy got a special assignment after he was forced to go back to patrol. After an SRO, he got a position working with the fire department. We had to have a fire department liaison
Okay.
because there were more and more arsons starting to pop up. So he wanted a police officer at the fire department to start doing
Initial.
investigations with the investigator and stuff and follow up on arson cases. So he got that. And that was a gravy job. So he did that for several years. So he's still working there, but he just got reassigned 6 months ago or so back to patrol.
So he's probably loving that.
No.
No,
He's putting in
no.
his retirement
Oh,
papers.
So then there was one.
Yeah. And that's the one that's a lieutenant now. So
Okay. So he might have a little bit left in him, but
I think he's got maybe another year left talking to him.
yeah.
But we'll still get together because even the guys that have retired get together for the poker party, get together for the lunch, tell old stories.
Well, and you're still very, very well known in the community also. You have a lot of community involvement.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot of time in community getting to know the people in the community as an officer, but you also did a lot of volunteer work, coaching,
Little
and
league,
other
soccer,
things.
basketball.
So are you still involved in any of that other community stuff, or have you dialed a lot of that back?
I dialed back on a lot of that. I'm trying to think.
Because I think that's something that watching you as I was growing up be that involved in the community. And as I look around now, the people in my generation and younger, you don't see that very often. There doesn't really seem to be that sense of community anymore.
Well, when I had free time, I wasn't looking to make more money on another job, which a lot of guys did that worked graveyard shifts, especially. They'd get at least a part-time job during the day.
It's not moonlighting then. What would that be? Daylighting?
Yeah. Anyway, where was I going with that one?
We were just talking about your volunteer work, some of the stuff that you're doing in the community, your outreach, all of the things that you were doing aside from your job.
So my initial assignment on patrol, like I said, was graveyard shift. And I'd come home from graveyard shift and volunteer in your brother's first grade class
Yeah.
at East Shore Elementary. Well, it turned out his teacher is still a very good friend of ours.
Yes.
And
yeah.
we got her and her then fiance, but now husband, involved in the church we were going to, and they still go to that church. But it turned out volunteering in his classroom, I'd go on the field trips and volunteer in the classroom and stuff, and go home and maybe get, like you're used to now, 4 hours of sleep.
Oh, yeah.
3 hours of sleep, go work graveyard shift.
Yep. Do what you got to do.
So I found that to be more rewarding
Than your job.
than my job.
Yeah.
Working in school with not only your own son, but I did it in other classes after he went on. And his teacher, who had just gotten proposed to by her fiance, they got married just before school had started. And so one of the things she wanted to do for her class was give this, not just her class, but the school, a demonstration of what a wedding was like and how you should act at a wedding if you ever attend a wedding with your parents.
So this was an elementary school.
Elementary school.
So she wanted to show the kids at the elementary school how to behave during a wedding.
Right. So she was going to redo her wedding at school,
Okay.
her and her husband. So they got the original group together. Well, the pastor that married them wasn't available. So she asked me if I would marry them.
You're not a pastor.
I said, no, I'm not a pastor. I can't do it. So they got a pastor, and she goes, well, can you walk me down the aisle as the father, as my father? I go, yeah, I can do that. So when they're redoing the wedding at the school in the multi-purpose room, all the kids are in the seated down and stuff, had to be quiet. And then when the music starts, they all got stand up, face the bride coming down the aisle with her dad. And I walked her down the aisle and gave her to the groom. And so from that point on, every time she introduces me to anybody, I want you to meet my dad.
So this is also interesting because like nowadays, just to even think about doing an event like that at a school, like people would probably lose their minds.
Yeah.
If you tried to show anything like that, what would be considered traditional in a school setting
Yeah.
would probably not be allowed to happen
Well,
anymore.
especially when a lot of the message was from a Christian's point of view,
Yeah.
that talked about God and you're meant to be, all that stuff.
Yeah. Your vows between.
Now and forever and that, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was something wouldn't be done today, I'm sure,
Yeah.
unless you did it in 4 different languages. And
Every potential combination of genders, and
yeah,
you'd have to be inclusive. You'd want to be inclusive.
oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. So some of these are actually things I've never heard.
And even now when we've gone to, she ended up being a cross country coach, assistant coach at the high school
Yeah.
that you guys went to, and your brother ran cross country.
Yeah.
So I was able to spend a lot of time with her as she was coaching and Michael during cross country. But we would go to events and I would introduce her as my daughter. I didn't know you had a daughter. I thought you just had 2 sons. I said, no, that's my daughter. Because she had always introduced me as her dad.
Yeah. So that's just the relationship that you two have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That kind of community involvement, like you just don't, like I've lived both there. I lived, in the Midwest for a while. I've lived on the East Coast now for a while. And a lot of these places in these cities that I've lived in, like you just don't really see that anymore.
Mhm.
And I don't know how much of that is just things I didn't see. Like maybe it still exists and I just wasn't part of it. Or, I mean, what does it feel like? You've been around the block for a while. Like,
We-
what is your thought on the overall like sense of community or the culture or the way things have gone since you were old enough to care
Well, I
to now?
don't know what goes on now in the sporting community. I don't think it's the same as it was when I was growing up with you and your brother.
Yeah.
But even after Michael got out of Little League and stopped playing baseball in Little League, once he got to be a sophomore or junior in high school, I still donated my time as an umpire.
Yeah.
So I was an umpire for a while
Yeah.
till I found out that the fans didn't like my low strike zone. So just because it hits the dirt doesn't mean it's not a strike.
Maybe.
So, yeah, the umpires nowadays have to get paid, even in not just high school, but Little League.
Really?
Yeah. If you're not paid, you don't ump,
Was that like do they have to be like certified, licensed?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
there's a whole different
You have to
level
go
of
to
bureaucracy.
classes, supply your own equipment, chest protector, clicker, brush, mask.
So you can't just volunteer to do that stuff anymore.
I don't know if it's that true everywhere, but there's just so many schools now
Mm.
that besides high schools, middle schools, I mean, athletics start so much younger now. I mean,
Oh, I mean, you have people that are 2, 3, 4 starting all kinds of athletic things now.
it's not just Little League. Right now, Michael's fiance's son plays high school level plus a different traveling team level. He's on 2 different teams, conflicting schedules, and he's playing baseball 24/7 now because he'll be a senior this next year. He's good. But
Is he trying to go pro or go college or?
I'm college first.
Yeah.
And that's what he's looking at right now. But he's good. I mean, he's a pitcher and an outfielder, left field. He's played first base. He's good at pretty much anything he does.
Yeah.
One of those what you consider natural athletes.
Sure. But still puts in a lot of hard work.
He does.
Because that's the other thing that a lot of
That's-
people assume people that are successful are either lucky or talented. They don't look at the amount of hard work that goes in
It's
to
not,
still be good at
and
those
it's not
things.
cheap. He's got a pitching coach, a hitting coach,
Yeah.
weightlifting coach.
Well, I mean, and that's the other thing. Most people that are at the top of their game, they don't do it alone. They have coaches, and
Yeah.
usually more than one. I think I remember seeing that like Michael Jordan at his peak in his career when he was the best, still had like 8 or 9 coaches.
Yeah.
Like just because you're the best at something doesn't mean you get rid of those coaches
You
either.
don't get to be the best by just walking on the court.
No, absolutely not. But yeah, so that's yeah, that's interesting. But overall, what's your opinion on just the way things have gone? Just better, worse, stayed the same?
Well, I definitely don't think it's better. I think there's more and more families have gone 2-income families.
Mm.
I remember as a school resource officer finding it so hard to reach a parent when their kid was in trouble.
Just
Or
they were at work or
they were at work,
okay.
usually. Or if their kid was in trouble, it wasn't his fault. It was the other person's fault, or it's my fault for thinking their kid could do that.
Because they were angels.
Yeah.
Their kids would never do anything wrong, even though they were caught with like 13 iPods. You planted them. You were
Well,
the cops, so
I
you
had-
were in the wrong.
I had such a good rapport with the coaches at Woodbridge High School when I was an SRO there that this one year the football team had a really, really good player who was going to be scouted. He had college scouts and stuff coming to watch him play at this one game. And just before that one game coming up, I think the game was on a Friday night. It was Wednesday. It was 2 days before the game that one of the kids that was caught in class with drugs was brought to my office. And during the interview, gave up where he got the drugs.
Hmm.
You-
I can guess who the source of
And
the
it-
drugs was.
And it was,
Mm.
but I had to prove it.
Sure, especially if you have a guy who's getting scouted, he's at the top. Everyone thinks he's going on to do things.
So we bring that kid in, talk to him. He didn't get him from me. I don't know what he's talking about. You know, can I search your locker? Oh, he gave me permission to search his locker. 'Cause
Okay.
He knows nothing's in there.
Okay.
Go to the locker, search it. No, nothing there. Okay, let's go search your football locker.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
go search that. Nothing there. I said, okay, you drive to school, don't you? Yeah. Well, let's go search your car. No. I said, really?
Well, if you're parking at school, that's probably an implied consent, yeah?
It is.
Okay.
Well, he was even one step dumber. He didn't park on the school parking lot. He thought he parked in the church parking lot next to the school.
So not school property, therefore public property.
But he wasn't thinking that so much, but his dad was.
Okay.
He lived with his dad, not his mom. They were separated. So I called his dad at work.
Mm-hmm.
Need your permission to search your son's car. He's not giving me permission. He goes, no, you're not getting it. I go, well, in between that time, I had ran the plate and found out that the car was actually registered to the guy's wife only,
Oh.
and they're separated. So it's not his car. It's in her name. I could get permission from her. So I said, okay. So I called her. The car's in your name. Here's what I suspect. Your son's hiding drugs in the car. I have a kid who was caught with drugs, says he got them from your son. Is it okay if I search your car?
Yeah. Because it's registered
That your
to
son
her.
drove to school.
Yeah.
She goes, yeah, go ahead, no problem. So I called the dad back. Just to let you know, I'm getting ready to search your son's car. I said you couldn't. I said, well,
It's not your car.
it's not your car. I called your wife. She gave me permission. I'm heading out there right now. If you want to come to see what we find, come
You're
on down.
More than welcome.
You don't go in that car until I get there. I said, no, you're not telling me. So we searched the car and found enough quantity of drugs, not just marijuana, but drugs,
Yeah.
to arrest him for sales.
Yeah. Intent to distribute or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we arrest him, confiscate the drugs. Then his dad gets to school. Here's what we found in the car. Well, how do you know my son put it there? I said, gee, I've got a witness that says that's where he got it from. Your son, it's his, he drove to school, so that's where, you can't do that. He's being scouted this, Friday
Yeah.
night. I said, well, that's not my problem. That's his problem.
Yeah. Decisions, consequences.
So the football coach stood behind me 100%. He goes, hey, he's suspended. He's off the team.
Yeah.
You can't kick him off the team? The coach goes, yeah, I can.
Yeah.
So I ruined his son's life, according to him.
No, it's not taking any responsibility.
Exactly.
Whether or not you agree with the drug laws or whatever, those are the ones on the books. The decisions you make, you have to face the consequences.
Exactly. So,
Yep.
but I'll never forget that in the office that day. It was a little sense of satisfaction
Mm-hmm.
when he goes, you ruined my son's future. I said, no, I didn't. He did.
Yeah.
And I loved being able to say that.
Yeah.
But
Well, but there's also something that I also remember from growing up. It's that everybody seemed to respect you.
yeah.
Even the kids that you arrested
Oh,
or
yeah.
that you put in the continuation high school, like
Mhm.
any of those kids, when I was out with you in public and we would run into them,
Mhm.
it was always, hey, how's it going? Hey, officer so-and-so, like, hey, thank you for blah, blah, blah. It was
Yeah.
always very respectful, very like good. It wasn't like people getting mad at you, people yelling at you. It was always, so I think in the end, they knew that you were doing the right thing and
Ex-
trying to help them adjust.
Except for that one kid at the end of our block, remember?
Yes. The kid that put a pair of pliers through the windshield of my car.
the car that you had built in our garage.
Yes.
Kind of like I did my
But
44.
it did look like the other car that was yours
Yeah.
at the time. So I get it. But that one guy did not like you.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the one that put the pliers or the vice grips through the windshield.
Yeah.
It was a friend of his.
Yeah.
Because he was selling drugs at the house at the end of the block, and the kid wanted drugs, and he goes, well, if you want these drugs, you got to go down and put
Do
these
this.
vice grips through his son's windshield, which is what he did.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever got the drugs, but it took a couple of days of investigating to
Find him.
but I mean, when we called the police department, it looked like the crime of the century had been committed.
I tell you, like it's true. Like I think it was 7 or 8 units
Mhm.
plus the CSI van. They
Plus,
were
the,
trying to dust for fingerprints on.
plus the canine officer.
Yep. Yeah, I think when the call went out and the address,
They knew whose
they knew
house
who
it was.
they knew whose house it was, and they sent everybody. That's one of those like blue, the blue blood people. Like you back each other. Something happens to one of you guys.
But unfortunately, since the suspect was a juvenile, the canine officer couldn't put the dog loose
Yeah.
to track him because he ended up only running like 2 blocks away and hiding in a bunch of bushes.
Yeah.
He said once we found out who he was and confronted him at school and got him to confess, then he told us where he was hiding while all the police cars were going around.
And it wasn't that far.
It wasn't that far at all. But we had a witness going back a little bit to the crime because your mom, my wife,
Yeah.
was upstairs in the office, which was your old bedroom.
Yeah.
sitting
Saw
at
him do it.
sitting at the desk looking out the window, and she saw him do it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, instead of calling me right away, she yelled out the window at the kid.
Yep. Hey.
He took off running. I'm going, why didn't you just come down and tell me? Anyway, he took off running. She gave me the direction he was running, and that was that. But we knew the house he came from. Went down and
Yeah.
surrounded that house, but couldn't get in because the kids wouldn't open the door, and the dad wasn't home. So we'll get you at school tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that
Crime of the century for the
Yeah.
mean streets of Irvine.
I think we had the whole department that was 10-8 that day at our house.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I remember. That was a strange time. But just wanted to thank you for talking with us.
Mhm.
Thank you for opening up about some stuff.
That's some stuff I didn't open up about.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of stories at some point that they would love to hear. Not yet. But thank you everyone that showed up. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to bringing more of these to you. I have a couple other guests lined up that I would like to bring on for you. I have a doctor from the VA hospital that's down the road and want to talk health. I want to talk about veteran affairs issues with him. I am also trying to get Derek Evans, one of the state representatives from West Virginia, also a January 6th defendant and somebody that was incarcerated because of January 6th. I would like to bring on as well. I have a couple other people in mind, so I look forward to bringing you those. So I hope you all have a wonderful week and a wonderful night. Take care of yourselves, and God bless.